Hey YouTube, it's Adrian. Just before we get you to this video, do me a favor and head over to pageantlaunch.com. We are starting the world's first dedicated pageant review site, and I would love for you to join our launch team. All you need to do is put in your email address. It's completely free. We are looking to make a pageant industry that is safe, transparent, and fair. I know it's like that most of the time, but over the last year, it's become very evident that it's not like that all of the time. So head over to pageantlaunch.com, put in your email address, and let's get you to this. Hey everyone, it's Adrian from the Pageant Project with you, and this is our first interview of the new year, new decade, 2020, with Kristen Routh, who is Ms. Intergalactic International 2019. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
It's a pleasure. Now, Kristen, can you give us, I guess, first an insight into who you are and where you are? Because when I got you to send the video in, obviously, you said you were close to being a doctor. You're a therapist, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So the background is often fascinating. So give us an insight into who you are first.
Sure, absolutely. Well, again, my name is Kristen Routh. I reside in San Diego, California. Currently, just moved actually a couple months ago, so getting a new territory here. But by trade, I'm actually a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have my bachelor's degree in exercise science and sports medicine, my master's in counseling psychology, and I'm finishing my doctorate currently in a dual doctorate of clinical psychology with sports psychology focus. So right now I see private practice clients online, but ultimately I'm really moving towards doing positive psychology and motivational psychology with organized groups such as sports groups or military.
And how did you get involved or interested in that area? Because obviously it sounds like you've gone fairly deep into it. This is not just a passing interest.
Exactly.
So how did it all start?
Yeah, my life has been not a straight line. So we'll put it that way. I initially set out to be a physical therapist or a doctor. And my whole background growing up was actually in pre-professional ballet and dancing. And so I got injured right when I had to make a critical choice in my career of whether or not I was going to go professional dancing or do the college route. And because of that injury, I actually pushed over into the medical side of things. So started, working in the sports psychology field, realized that there's so much more to healing than just physical. That's where the mental interest came in. So I switched degrees over in my master's over into counseling, realized in counseling that there's more to healing than just the mind. So took a little time off and did some personal training, nutritional studies, massage therapy, and then slowly incorporated back into the overarching degree that I have now that I've been working on for 7 years, which is a PhD in sports psychology, essentially. So it encompasses everything, but it's not been a straight line.
But that's amazing. I mean, obviously there's a term holistic health, but very often people who claim they have holistic health don't have the depth of knowledge that I assume that you would have. So is your ultimate goal, I mean, obviously you put a lot of work into it, is your ultimate goal to be able to help someone heal no matter what the problem is?
Yeah, my big passion is actually taking people who have health and making them even healthier. And what I mean by that is no matter if you're dealing with any issue under the sun, whether it's medical or physical or emotional, is that you still have a foundation that's based in health. Otherwise, you wouldn't recognize that you were distressed. So it's drawing from that aspect of the health that you do have, amplifying it in a positive psychology term, basically, and turning that into a strength to be able to draw from for healing. So it's not necessarily getting people back to their baseline, but actually helping people get even stronger than they were before because you're able to amplify that basic line of health.
And in your years of experience, this might be a very difficult question to answer, but I am fascinated by counselor. I'm a certified life coach myself.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
What sort of lessons have you learned about humanity or people, or what are the most common problems or the underlying things that tie everything together? Because we're all very different, but as humans, we have a lot of similarities. So do you have any sort of observations or lessons that you've learned along the way?
Oh, absolutely. So many. But I think the biggest one that I have seen just in the more recent years of my study is that we through technology are so interconnected, but emotionally
Mm,
we are so disconnected. And so, we have quick access to anybody. We have quick access to being able to have interviews, over Skype
mm,
in a heartbeat from different continents even. However, from an emotional aspect, we're still missing the sitting next to one another, having a personal relationship, having touch, having that thing that we actually crave, which is just being in each other's presence energetically. And because of that, since we're so connected but so disconnected at the same time,
mm.
our mental health is really suffering. Our social health is suffering very much, and we're kind of in my opinion, a scary turning point right now that we kind of need to address in order to bring back
Yeah.
more of the interpersonal and true interaction that we have and that we need.
Yeah. Do you have any opinions, I guess, as to what might remedy that? Because there are two schools
Yeah.
of thought. One says that
Hmm.
we need to basically turn social media off so that we can
Sure.
reconnect, but that
Yeah.
obviously has a huge problem for a lot of people. The other one is that social media isn't going anywhere, it's just going to get worse, and we need to find
Mhm.
some way where we can have the personal relationships and the social media exist side by side. So do you have any
Yep.
opinions on that?
Absolutely. Well, the key is balance, regardless, right? In any form of health, it's finding balance. In your nutrition, it's finding balance, right? It's not just cutting out every junk food that's available, but it's
Mm,
having it in moderation, right? It's the same thing with with sleep too. Is that we don't want to go long periods of time without sleep. We want to find a balance. There might be a couple nights where we stay out late, but majority of the time we want to stay pretty consistent. Same goes for social media and for anything that's disconnecting ourselves from
mm,
our true health and our true person. So I always tell my clients is that there's nothing wrong with social media, but there's something wrong when it replaces your real life. And so finding that healthy balance of what am I going to use, define what I'm going to use social media for. It might be checking
mm.
in on grandma who lives in, 3 states over,
Sure.
or, sharing a recipe in a group, or finding actually a social outlet of from an online group. But ultimately is checking yourself to make sure that then you're using those tools and resources to have a social life in person. I mean, this is coming from an
Mm,
online therapist too, where the majority of my practice is
mm.
actually done online. And so I have to check myself too and realize like, all right, I've been in front of the screen all day. Now it's time to actually go connect with people, that I can touch.
Mm. Reminds me of that saying, physician, heal thyself.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, that's a fascinating sort of behind the scenes look at you. And I could certainly talk for a long time about that because, as I said, psychology for me is a fascination. It underlies everything.
Sure.
But let's go to the pageant side of
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
So tell me more about the Ms. Intergalactic International system and how you got involved, because as you mentioned, it's relatively new for you.
Very new. Yeah, yeah. So I'm new to pageantry in general, and I'll give you a little backstory on that in a moment. But the Ms. Intergalactic International is a premier pageant. So this is actually the first year that it is launching, if you will. And so I was picked as a representative for my category, which is the Ms. category, the unmarried over 25 category. And I was really drawn to wanting to represent this title because it is based primarily in community outreach and being involved in your community. So community service is a huge part of the scoring of the pageant. There are the traditional evening gown and swimwear
Hmm.
and interview too, but the real depth of this pageant is that it's encouraging people from all over to get involved in their communities and then have a passion that they can talk about and bring to the pageant. The theme that the pageant have that is really focused on is anti-cyberbullying, which is very
Right.
appropriate to this pageant too, because the preliminaries are done all online. Going back to our conversation about what we have
Sure.
access to, is this pageant is truly available to anybody anywhere, because your initial competition and submission of your content is based on videos that you produce, that you are actually competing in each one of those categories. Your video that you submit where you talk about your platform, interview, and then also even evening wear and swimwear is done over video to begin with.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you do? I mean, the interview that makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
With the video, with what you're wearing, for example, did you have to shoot that yourself, or do they organize a day for you to come in? How does that work?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because again, the pageant director really wanted to make this an accessible pageant, not only location wise for people, but also financially as well. And so
Mm,
most everybody has a phone or access to a phone, and so everything can be done actually over your phone. With there's the pageant walks you through once you're part of the submitting your application, if you will.
right.
It walks you through how to do it, how to look into the camera, what lighting you need, what needs to be in the background, giving you cues. There's an app that's used for interview as well, where the questions actually pop up onto the screen, and there's a
Oh
timer
wow.
so that you have a lot of interaction with it. There's even a tutorial on how to use a green screen, because those are the things that you see with
Yep.
with in TV and movies. But what the
Mm,
pageant director does is, after you submit your material with you behind a green screen, which you can either rent or purchase for very cheap on Amazon, she goes
mm,
in and puts graphics in and interaction so that you have a lot of really interesting stuff going on behind you, and it looks really
mm.
professional. So each contestant too walks away with a fantastic portfolio too, video wise, that's talking about them, but also giving them the experience to learn how to do media over the phone or
Of
over video.
course. And do you know what the motivation? I mean, you mentioned that it's in its early stages or its first year. Do
Yeah.
you know what the motivation behind starting this particular pageant was? Because it sounds quite
Yeah.
different.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the director Joyce is a fantastic person. She's been involved in many pageant systems herself in her competition years, and she has a story that's really interesting too, where she dealt with bullying throughout her entire life,
Right.
and even dealing with bullying in the pageant systems and pageant industry
Mm,
as well. And so she really wanted to do something that would be different, that would allow maybe people that are even experiencing bullying or experiencing being timid and feeling overwhelmed of being initially in preliminaries with 50 other women in a room, and bring the pageant experience to the person so that they can have that individual control over submitting their material, so that you
mm.
really capture who they are, as opposed to just capturing their anxiety or their overwhelm. So her motivation is really based in making the pageant accessible, number one, but also providing an opportunity for women to be able to express themselves in a way that isn't overwhelming and isn't based purely in competition, but is based in your self-esteem.
Right. And can you give us an insight into what made you decide to enter the world of pageantry to begin with? Because I mean, it certainly sounds like you have
Yeah.
enough going on. So it wasn't like you didn't
Sure.
have anything else to do.
Yeah. Well, in my own self interest, so as a therapist, I have to practice really good self care. And a lot of my day, obviously, is spent dealing with other people's problems, other people's
Mm,
emotions, and negativity too. One of my specialties I work with is really severely acute cases. And so acute means we're talking multiple hospitalizations, very severe psychiatric conditions. And it wears on you after a while.
yeah, I
And
can
it's
imagine.
not, yeah, it's after, 8, 9 hours of that, of um, feeling, that wait, I need to kind of do something for myself. And so I set for the past several years, many years now, that rather than doing a New Year's resolution, I do a New Year's challenge to myself of saying, you're going
Mm,
to do something that's completely out of your comfort zone, that will either scare the crap out of you or make you grow, or both, one of the two.
probably
And
both.
yeah, exactly. And so I've challenged myself every year for several years now to do just that. In the process, I've done things from learning to shoot a gun, to traveling internationally, to learning another language, to riding a motorcycle and learning how to do that. And I was stumped one year. This was a few years ago, 2016. Stumped one year of like, what do I do? And I was out to lunch with my best friend, and she's interested in what I'm doing each year too. And she says, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. And she says, we got to do something different than what you did last year, like very opposite end of the spectrum. And
Mm,
last year, the year before that is that's when I got my motorcycle license, and so was riding with the guys, and and kind of having a rough and tumble experience of not really caring what my hair looked like underneath a
yeah.
helmet. So she goes, let's do something super girly. Enter a pageant. And at that point, I was in my mid 30s, and I was like, they don't make pageants for women in their mid 30s, not married, all this stuff. And so we started doing some research and realized that there is actually this huge category, the Ms. category, that's
Mm,
available in a lot of pageant systems. And so, so a few months rather before the actual competition, I said, you know what, let's try it. I ordered a dress off Amazon. I kind of clicked Google of like, how do you do a pageant, all
Yeah.
these things, and had the best time. And that was the Ms. America pageant in 2016. Based on what I learned, I didn't do very well, we'll put it that way, but based on what I learned is I had a great time. I learned so much about even just, makeup and hair and all that good stuff, but really more about how to develop my own brand and my own self, because that's something that as a therapist sitting behind a closed door, nobody ever sees me work except for the client. Nobody ever knows, who I actually am, because the focus is on the client. And so coming into pageantry, of being able to say, this is who I am, this is my brand, this is what I'm passionate about and bringing to the table, was a really, really nice change for me. And so the pageant bug kind of bit after that. And I thought I was one and done, but after Ms. America, then Ms. California Petite USA was something that I was kind of looking into, because I'm very short. I can't tell from sitting down or video, right? But I'm 5'2", and so that was one of my obstacles, if you will, with other pageant systems is, we'd be in a lineup, everybody's here, and here I am. So even in 5-inch heels. So I said, hey, this is a system that even speaks more to who I am. It's my natural body, my natural height. Let's do this. And had another wonderful experience with Miss California Petite USA. Went to nationals, placed 4th runner-up. And so kind of found where this was, a good fit for me. And so after that, I said, I'm retired. We're good. I don't need to do any more. and then every year I kind of get poked and pulled back in. So when the pageant director reached out to me and said, there's this pageant system, I instantly fell in love with the concept, and I said, yep, sign me up. So this is something that I want to represent and really want to be a part of.
When I've interviewed girls who started in pageantry, let's say earlier, for example, when they're teens or even pre-teens or even before that, is often the case, a lot of them talk about how they've discovered themselves or worked on facets of themselves throughout the pageant process, the pageant journey. For yourself, you said you started sort of 35, mid-30s.
Yeah.
Have you had that same sort of learning and self-discovery that maybe the younger women have had through pageantry yourself?
Absolutely. And that I think is the key to pageantry that most people, unless you're involved in it, don't understand, is that it really is, it's not a competition. It's actually a betterment of yourself and finding out even in where you're not so strong, because we are being scored. And so even when you find out, oh, I've scored really low in this area, it's not telling you that you're wrong or that you're bad or that you aren't good enough. It's actually telling you you can either work on this in a new way, or you know what, look at all these other strengths that you have in other categories and let those shine. And so just like I was saying before, is I can't change my height. That's going to be something that, works against me in a lot of traditional modeling or pageant roles. However, I scored very high in interview. I scored very high in community service. And those are the two things that I feel are most who I am as well. So, so to your point of did I grow in the same way that maybe a younger girl would be learning about her strengths and learning about who she is? Definitely. Because I think no matter what age you are, and whether you're male or female too, is we all have insecurities, and we all think that we need to be a certain way or different in order to be accepted. And I found the opposite of actually in pageantry, I didn't focus on the areas where I was rejected. I was focused on the areas where I actually scored really well. And that made me feel really happy.
And you said that the community service was one of the parts where you scored really well. So can you give us an insight into your community service and what you did?
Sure. Yeah. Starting back from 2016, I was very active in, again, kind of the mental health side of volunteering and community service. I have a very strong passion for mental health for first responders. So firemen, policemen, EMTs, people that every single day take care of other people very selflessly. And it's kind of an ignored group of individuals too, because we look at these men and women as being very strong and having it all together, but they carry with them all the traumas that they experience. Military is included in that as well. So I'd always been involved in community service and volunteering, but the pageants helped me to create connections to go even deeper into that experience. So the first year of my pageants, pageantry was really focused on mental health causes that were supporting military and first responders. And through that, I kept making more and more connections. And I was volunteering every single weekend for months on end, to the point where I actually earned the Gold President's Volunteerism Award for my community
Wow.
service over the years. So that was something I was extremely, extremely proud about. But more so is that the connections I made then carried over beyond my pageant experience too, and I'm still involved in some of the key nonprofits that I really find are helpful and effective, and continue to serve with them too.
And for the rest of your reign and then beyond, I mean, what goals do you have, or what outcomes do you have? And obviously you initially thought you were one and done. That's
Right.
clearly not the case. So in terms of pageantry and where you see that taking you or leading you, just give us an insight as to how you see the next, few years or the future
Sure.
planning out.
Sure. Yeah. I'm keeping an open mind, is what I'll say, is that I don't have my eye on a certain system, or that I even need to get back on stage or anything like that. But what I do know is that I miss the organized aspect of pageantry, where the self-discipline of, that you're really working towards something, and again, the community service aspect too. And so, like I said, I keep getting that bug. So I think in the next few years, I'm focusing on just finishing my doctorate at this point, finishing off my reign too under this current title, continuing my regular community service. But I think, if and when I ever get married, there might be a Mrs. division I might want to enter. So.
Fair enough. Just in terms of misconceptions, I mean, you entered a pageant, obviously, as you said, you got your dress off Amazon and things like that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, I'm assuming that you weren't super involved in pageantry before you actually got involved with pageantry.
Yeah.
So just in terms of misconceptions, were there any sort of misconceptions you had about pageantry that you since have eradicated from yourself?
Definitely. And I probably was, how to say this, one of the women that, since a lot of my life has really focused on academics, I always kind of pushed pageantry off as, no, those aren't for the smart girls, those are for the pretty girls.
Exactly.
And so that was probably the biggest misconception that I had. When I went into my first pageant, I realized that there's other doctors there's women from all different cultural backgrounds that have all these different experiences, educational backgrounds, just, passions, life in general, of like what they really, really are passionate about cause-wise. And so that was mind-blowing to me. I made some of the best friends that I'm still in contact with now through pageant systems that are all over the country, because we shared that common passion for something that we really wanted to bring to the table in through pageantry. So I think that's probably my biggest misconception, was I thought, again, pageants are for the pretty ones that just want to wear sparkles, but it's actually it's women that really want to make a difference and really want to be active and involved in their communities.
And if there was someone who's maybe considering entering a pageant, and let's say similar to yourself, similar demographic, and let's say working, got a career, what advice would you give them if they're considering entering a pageant in terms of where to start or what research to do?
Yeah. I think some of the main online resources, again, websites, just Googling. I literally Googled pageant for women over 30 and had a ton of stuff pop up. So,
right.
And so I think, starting there and actually really looking at what are you being judged? What is the criteria and what are you being judged? Because every single system, as we know, is very different. And if you're not feeling so comfortable with, wearing a swimsuit on stage, there's plenty of pageants where you don't have to do that. Or if you're feeling like, I really, really want to challenge the glamour aspect and the modeling aspect, then there's plenty of pageants for that too. So I think doing the research, first of all, of finding out what the system is about. I think also doing research on who the past winners have been too is also really important, so that you get a feel of like, what is the pageant system actually looking for? And I think all of us, anybody that enters any sort of competition hopes to win, even if it's not the end goal, you still have hope. And so I think kind of looking at what are you, what is the system looking for, I think is really helpful for guiding the path. Then as far as life balance too, for a working woman over 30 that is, thinking that they want to do this for themselves, is carving out time so that you're still doing your life, but looking at this as an added bonus to your life. So it's carving out a few hours, like I said, on the weekend to do the community service, a couple hours during the week to maybe research, dresses or makeup or interview skills. And so it turns into a hobby that is incorporated into your life, as opposed to a oh no, what did I just do? I just entered this cram session. I got to figure out all the things.
So, what are your favorite aspects of the pageant competition? Is it the interview and the community service are your two favorite parts?
Yeah, interview and community service are my favorite parts because I think that's where I do the best. However, secretly, is I really, really do like the evening gown portion, because I think it actually speaks to my dance background as well. As I love being on stage,
Right.
I love wearing a costume, if you will, and performing, and that's really, really what it is. My evening gown is horrible, by the way, because it's like it's very dancey, it's very choreographed,
Right.
if you will. There's probably jazz hands at some point, but but ultimately is I like that, and that is really that's an aspect I grew up with too, of being on stage, being in the spotlight, and having people enjoy your presence of that on stage. So I do secretly like that, but I think from the aspect of where do I feel most fulfilled is definitely interview and community service.
It's interesting. A lot of the girls that I've interviewed or women that I've interviewed do have that dance background, and the reason they love pageantry so much is simply being on stage.
Being on stage,
which is where I think a lot of people would have anxiety. They actually thrive off just being on stage and having that adrenaline. A random question: Did you struggle to find your evening gown, given that you're 5'2"?
Yeah. So what's fascinating is the story gets even better. So I went on Amazon and I Googled pageant gowns, and of course everything comes up for 4-year-olds, is like kind of the toddlers and tiara stuff. And I'm like, I wonder if they make my size. We'll see now. And so, I did again, kind of like, I just need something because we're down to the wire of, and so I Googled, I think it was pageant gowns for short people, and I had 3 options come up. So I said, you know what, that one's blue. I like blue. Let's do that one. And so, interestingly enough, it was a foreign company that hand makes all of their dresses, and the dress only cost, I think, $75, something like that. But it was designed for my measurements, and shipped overseas, arrived in a week, and was custom tailored basically for me. So did I struggle finding one that would fit me? Yeah, initially, but I lucked out in realizing that there's actually resources overseas where they'll custom make it for you.
Wow, that's amazing, and that's a bargain as well. $75, you've done really well.
Yeah, well,
tailor made for yourself.
Even better is I resold it for $100, so I actually made money off the pageant.
You might need to start a business on that. I think a lot of pageant girls would love to see how they can do that. Just in terms of when you told your friends, family, colleagues, etc., when you were starting your pageant journey or telling them about the new ones, did they have any sort of reaction to it? I imagine they must have.
Absolutely. I'll break it down into a couple of different ways. Is I kind of have my in-person friends, my ones that are my ride or dies that know who I am. They weren't as surprised because they're like, you're always doing something weird. So, this is weird. And so this fits right in with what you normally do. So they were very supportive. My online friend group, which was pretty big, they were more like, oh my gosh, because just like we've been talking about with social media, I only really post things that are relevant to my career or what I'm interested in at the time. And so when I suddenly revealed, hey, doing the Miss America pageant, everybody thought it was a joke because I posted it on April 1st. And so everyone's like, yeah, right. That's that's not happening. And I said, oh, but here's actually my fan page, and here's when the competition is happening. And I got a lot of like, I can't believe you're doing this. Like, this is not your thing. You're not going to do great. To go get it. This is great. So through my journey of pageantry, it was really neat. Is so many people were just really excited to see that that what I was involved in was making me happy. So the community service aspect, again, people knew that I really love that and have been involved in it. So seeing that that's actually a big piece of the pageantry world, they're like, all right, this kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
My family was a different story too. So my family, again, they had no idea that I was even looking for something, out of the box to do. And so made the post, and both of my parents who, are highly educated people, and they're kind of like, pageants? Really? You're working on your doctorate. So, so how does this all fit in? And what's amazing about it is my mom and dad also became my biggest fans during the pageant journey, because they were new to the pageant scene too, but they were excited to learn about it and grow with me. And so they came to my pageants, they made the signs, the whole deal. reel, and my mom was sharing all
wow.
my posts, and like her friends got into it, and they were talking about all the things I'm doing and looking at dresses, and it just kind of was neat to see that something that I was totally foreign to actually became a
Mm.
topic that bonded a lot of my family and my friends, and showed them a different aspect of myself too.
And you mentioned the New Year challenges that you
Yeah.
set for yourself in place of New Year's resolutions. So I want to ask two questions. One is,
Sure.
did you set one 15 days ago? And two, I really like the sound of this. Can you give us some ideas for potential like New Year's challenges that we could set ourselves? But I guess first one, have you set one in the last 15 days?
Yeah, well, I actually have two. So one is pretty straightforward. It's finish my doctorate. So get
Right.
get that done. So that's
Sure.
kind of the big one. But the second one is say yes more than no. And so what that means is I've really done a huge transition in my life. Like I said, in the last couple of months, is I went from an area where I was totally focused on work, totally focused on school, and isolated because I was living in an area that even though it was in California, it was very suburban, not a lot of
Yeah.
things to do, not a lot of places to go out. And so I didn't have a huge friend group in person. And I didn't have a lot of connections, and I was realizing that was really wearing on me. So on a whim, I uprooted. I said, I'm going to move to a whole nother city where there's different nightlife, different experiences, different opportunities, and just say yes when opportunities come up. So if people ask me to go do things, say yes, rather than say, oh, I got to study, because I wasn't used to, having this social life. And so even in these last couple of weeks, I've said yes to many invites from people to go and do different things or be involved in different groups. And because of that, I'm making new friends, again, learning new aspects of my life that I didn't know could be part of my life. And I'm just kind of on this trajectory now of really taking advantage of what comes my way.
So if, let's say, someone watching this or listening to this wanted to emulate your New Year's challenge, because
Sure.
I'm liking the sound of it myself.
Great.
So can you give us some guidelines as to how you might pick a challenge?
Yep. I think where to start is actually making a list of all the things that scare you and all the things that you say, I would never, ever do this in a million years. This is actually a really good therapeutic exercise too, to know yourself, is you truly make a list of all the things and say, oh, I would never, travel by myself. I'd never go to a movie by myself. I would never do, never enter a pageant, that sort of thing. And then next to it, write why. And because the why part is actually your biggest obstacle. And so if it's, I would never travel by myself. Why? Because I wouldn't know how to have fun. Like, how do I have fun without having somebody else? And so that's where your challenge starts, is maybe not even with the traveling by yourself, but learning how to have fun by yourself, is going and doing activities. And so maybe it's the challenge turns into once a month, I take myself out on a date and do something with myself and learn how to kind of spend time. So that's one angle to start. That's where I started. So I made my list, all the things that I was like, nope, never in a million years am I going to do that. Got rid of the excuse for why I won't do it, and then put into play the actual action plan of how do I make this happen. So I'll go back to even motorcycle riding is probably the best one for an example here. Is I always thought motorcycles are dangerous. Don't ever do it. I still kind of think they're dangerous, but don't ever do it. Don't be a part of it. This is not what you do because you're a good girl. There's no way you should be on the back of a bike or even driving one. And all of these, when I put it on paper, I realized all the misconceptions and judgments I was making about an activity and even a community that I had no part of and no understanding of. So once I said, you know what, let me go learn. I said, how, again, Google is motorcycle classes. And in my area, there are Highway Patrol actually puts on classes to learn how to ride a motorcycle.
Oh, wow.
So I did a structured motorcycle class. It was me and a bunch of other guys basically, but learned to ride. Learned to ride, made friends in the process too there, and said, you know what, this is actually kind of fun. And so through that, realized that I have other friends through social media that also ride, that hadn't really, talked about it much. So we actually kind of formed a little motorcycle crew in my area.
A biking gang.
Yeah, biking gang of all young professionals that, have kids at home too that need to. So it was kind of funny. It was kind of funny. So So going back to what we're saying here is I think that's probably the best place to start is look at what you don't want to do or what you think you don't want to do, look at the excuses behind it, and then figure out a plan to actually get rid of the excuses and just dive in. Because the wonderful thing about a challenge like this is it doesn't mean you have to do it for the rest of your life either. So
Yeah.
if I hated motorcycle riding, I'd never do it again. And in fact, in my move, I sold my bike because I'm like, this isn't a huge part of my life anymore. But then there's other things that like I said, one of my challenges was traveling by myself. That I learned so much from that, and that's just a norm now in my life. And so, what you learn from your experiences is what do you want to actually incorporate into your life, and what do you say? Nope, I'm good. I tried it. I have the information I need, and kind of move on to the next thing.
So it sounds like, if I'm reading this correctly, it's more about addressing the underlying issue or fear that you have more so than the challenge itself.
Exactly. Yeah. It's less about the accomplishing the thing or the reward at the end, and it truly is more about the journey. Right? Is what you learn from it. And since it is something that I set for myself, and it could be set at any time of the year, to be honest. But what I set for myself is I just want to finish it by the end of the year, and so I want to start it at the beginning of the year, but I want to finish it by the end of the year. And so that might mean that I finish it 1 month in, and then decide, well, do I want to do something else? Or it might mean that I take the entire year, like pageantry, and this is a big focus, and there's a culminating event at the end, and a kind of an evaluation process. So I just think it's phenomenal for personal growth, no matter what.
It's amazing. I'll definitely give that a go because I'm itching to do something a bit different for the new year. I did read. I don't know if you've heard of Tim Ferriss, but in the new year he has this almost like a fear-setting goal exercise. So similar to what you described, identifying your fears and then working out what they mean, and then setting yourself objectives based on that. Kristen, just before we go to the final 10 questions, for people to get in contact with you, I mean, maybe for pageantry, or maybe because they see you and they want you to be their therapist, what's the best way to get in contact with you? Yeah,
probably social media is the best. So on Instagram, my handle is @Chris Routh, and I'll spell it. It's KRISROUTH. You can also find me on Facebook under Kristen Routh, and there are a couple fan pages from my past pageants on there. Also, MissIntergalacticInternational.com is the website for the pageant system. You can contact the director there, and also contact me directly through there for if there's any appearances or even just questions that you have.
Perfect. And finally, is there anyone that you want to give a shout out to for supporting you along the journey? Pageantry, bikie gang, or otherwise?
Exactly. That's a long list, right? I feel like my Academy Award moment here now. Definitely the director of Miss Intergalactic International, Joyce, has just been phenomenal. I think her vision is fantastic. I think that it's like any system that is new. It takes some time to grow, but I really encourage people to check it out because she has such a vision, such a passion. It's coming from a place that truly is a desire for her to help other people and provide an opportunity for other people. And I think that when you're coming from that aspect, it's a really beautiful thing. So
perfect. All right, Kristen, final 10 questions, and this is about as pageant-esque as we'll get. Just so you know, it's not rapid fire. A lot of people assume because I say final 10 that you have like a 30-second timer. We don't. You can be as verbose or non-verbose as you want. So question 1, what is your favorite word?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's going to have to be Gustavo. And Gustavo is the name of my bulldog. And he is my best friend, my companion. And he's currently snoring over on the couch right now. He looks like a splatted meatball. But Gustavo was my dream dog, where I always wanted something sloppy that had a really big name attached to it. And he is the epitome of that. So whenever I see him, it makes me smile. Whenever I talk about him, it makes me smile. And everybody in my area knows who Gustavo is. So that's my favorite word.
Right. Question 2, what is your least favorite word?
Ooh, that's a good one too. Probably there's a couple, but I'll go with the one that kind of jumps into my head first is inappropriate. And and I don't mean the word is inappropriate, but the actual word inappropriate. And the reason I say that is there's been a lot of times in my life where somebody has says, hey, that's inappropriate, where it's not because of my behavior necessarily, but that's not the right time for how you want to do things. And I think that's very limiting. So even to the point where in dance, it was it's inappropriate that I had the body type that I had, pageantry. It's inappropriate that you would want to enter a pageant when you're 5'2", that, and kind of having those words. And I think if you attach yourself to that word, that it's inappropriate, and you're letting somebody else define what's appropriate for you, it's extremely limiting. So kind of going from a bigger sense, I don't like using that word. I never really use that word. And I think that's probably the thing that maybe triggers me a little bit too.
Yeah, that you probably hear that a lot in your sessions, in your career as well. A lot of people saying that they can't do it because it's inappropriate and therefore holding themselves back.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
Question 3, in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
Yeah, the thing that gets me excited the most is helping other people and seeing them change. And I know that probably sounds like a foo-foo answer coming from a therapist, but that's also why I do what I do. Is I myself have been in pretty low places and have had people help me to get me out of those places, and realizing that moment when you cross from I feel hopeless into wow, there's actually hope. Is amazing. And when you can see that and be part of that process for somebody else that you're helping, I think that's one of the biggest blessings in life, of being able to help somebody find their happy, or even just their hope for that moment or for that time period that you're with them. Because it really is just, I think that's what human connection is all about, is helping each other be better people.
Agreed. Question 4, what turns you off?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that turns me off is people telling me what to do. And
that doesn't surprise me at all.
And I mean, also probably why I'm single and not married, but no, just kidding. But
it could be. You just need to find the right person.
Could be, right? So, I this kind of goes back to what we're saying too. Is I appreciate leaders. I really do, and I respect leaders, and I respect people who need to take charge in order to help others, or guide the path. But when somebody tells me what to do without an explanation behind it or a purpose behind it, that's an immediate, not going to happen. So that's also probably why this year I'm also trying to say yes a lot more than no, because when people are like, let's go downtown at 4 a.m, and I'm like, no, that sounds awful. Don't tell me what to do. It's more of like, all right, let me kind of take this in. Is this something that could challenge me? Could be a good thing. So there you go. Telling me what to do. I probably need to work on that a little bit more. That might be next year. I'll be more flexible next year.
Love it. Question 5. What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, let's see. This is probably super weird, is the sound, and you probably won't know it unless you're actually in this world, but the sound of a pointe shoe, a ballet shoe that is fresh, meaning you just got it. It's hard like a brick, basically. And when you walk onto a wood floor the first time, it's this really unique sound of like a rock on hitting wood. And but it's done in a very, you're obviously dancing while you're doing it, and it's done in a very systematic way. So what is kind of an ugly sound of something hard hitting wood actually sounds really pretty, because it is done in a choreographed way. So I know that sounds weird, but whenever I hear that, if I'm taking dance classes or see it in a movie or whatever, it just like instantly sets me back into the world of ballet.
That's very, very specific.
Yeah, I know.
I love it. What sound or noise do you hate?
Yeah. Somebody breathing through a mustache. And this is a trigger. So this is a trigger that goes back probably to my time growing up when I was in church, and we'd be sitting, in the pews and listening to the sermon, and everything's really quiet. And then there's old men with mustaches sitting behind me, and it just goes whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I would be so distracted by it. I'm like, I'm trying to have a moment with God here, and all I hear is your nasals with the hair. And so, yeah, so that's a little, that's probably probably my least favorite sound, I would think.
That's fair enough. I think we can understand that. Question 7. If you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
I think from personally and just for professionally is being able to read people's minds, because I think the obviously from a therapist aspect, you only get what they give you. And so you have to kind of fill in the pieces. And so if somebody says, I'm sad, there's so many layers to that of what does that really mean? What are you thinking about when you're saying that? Or even like, I'm happy. It's like there's so many layers to that as well. And as a therapist, you have to look at all the other stuff, the body cues, the language, the word choice that's being used. And it's a lot of work to fill in the pieces that is essentially a guess of how the person actually is truly feeling. So if I could read minds, that would be phenomenal. It'd also be great too for my dating life. So
that might be cheating a little bit. Question 8. What occupation other than your own would you most like to attempt?
That's a good one. Probably join the military. With my work with that population, there's such a discipline and such a brotherhood, sisterhood that and a selflessness that's also attached to that. That you don't find that in a lot of other settings, especially in a workforce. And to think too that, especially with military, is that you're working towards a common goal for people that you don't even know. That's a really, really huge sacrifice. And so that culture has really fascinated me. I'm obviously not, beyond the age of even enlisting at that point, but I think the of being able to be involved in that community has really kind of sparked my interest too about what other opportunities are there for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Question 9, what occupation other than your own would you definitely not like to attempt?
Being a chef, man. So that's a quick answer too, man. So
Very quick.
Yeah. I love a
bit too quick.
I love cooking, but I hate making all the prep work and the decisions about cooking. And so I really do. I love cooking, but I hate having to go to the grocery store and pick the ingredients and do all the chopping and then wait for it to cook because I'm really hungry, and then doing the cleanup and all this. There's so many steps to it. So I think from a chef's aspect of having people, again, telling you what to do too, they're putting their orders in and saying, make me this. That would just be a really bad combination for me.
Yeah, I don't think people want to go to a restaurant, tell the chef what to make, and the chef decides, you know what, I'm just going to make whatever I want.
No, this is what I feel like today. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that would go down particularly well, but who knows? Final question, Kristen. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Yeah, job well done, and whatever that means, is because I am a Christian. I do believe in God. I feel that each one of us has been given a purpose and given specific blessings and skills and the right people at the right times in order to make things happen. I've seen that alive in my own work and my own life. And so I know that my journey is not done, and I would love to be able to, enter in the gates of heaven and everything makes sense. And it makes sense because I've done exactly what I was supposed to accomplish. Perfect.
Okay. Well, Kristen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this, and I appreciate you connecting people too to the world of pageantry and giving more insight into what this is all about.
Well, as you very well know, it's a very interesting world, isn't it? A very varied world.
Very much so.
And I'm going to thank everyone for watching. Kristen, I'll keep you on the line for just a sec, but we will speak to you next time. Hey guys, it's Adrian again. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and remember to head over to pageantlaunch.com and join the launch team for our pageant review site. All you need to do is put in your email address. Thanks, and speak to you next time.